Let's start. Good to have folks paying attention via Brattleboro TV, and thank you for coming, the three of you. Folks, I apologize. I think the meeting was supposed to start at 6, but I sent the wrong time to Barb, and she thought I knew what I was talking about and didn't question me. So.
Well, I looked at it too, and I didn't catch the different time.
Oh, good.
Because I was expecting 6, and then I saw later on 6:30. I'm just looking at the next meetings. We are scheduled for the 17th at 6, and January 7th at 6, and January 21st at 6. So 6
yeah,
is
so
the
6 it
time
is.
that we're trying to do.
So we have a bunch to do. I want to just let the three folks who are in the room and sitting in, I think one of you at least has been here before, but welcome, thanks for coming. So this is sort of a non-typical, we're not really a board meeting, we're a committee, we're a study committee, and we're learning information and coming up with ideas. So we are going to have 5 minutes, at which point you can talk to us, but it's not really, we're not engaging with you, we're just hearing from you, okay? And that'll be, you know, in a few minutes, just so you know. There was some, Jill is not here, but hopefully she's coming. Is Jill coming? So there was
Kim
Ben.
is as well. And Kim said she
Okay.
might be ashamed of it.
Okay. Are we all here, other than those folks, I think? So,
No, not think so. Is Trista gonna be here?
Trista's not coming tonight.
Okay, so no Trista.
So the voting members are here,
Yeah.
other than
Yeah.
Jill.
so there was some banter in email as to roles and who gets to speak, and so are there any questions about that? The idea is that all the folks, I think, who are sitting here speak, can engage, and I would encourage folks who haven't been engaging to do so. And if there's a board member out there, they're considered part of the public if they're not members. So we're going to, a chunk of the meeting is going to be listening to Frank share some information, sort of a small chunk. And then we're gonna, I think, change around the agenda a little bit and talk about the worksheet, because that's really important. What we decided at our last meeting is that we were going to at least, we're gonna move forward on seeing if the accelerated merger will work for us. That's the first stage, because that's a deadline that's facing us. And we have a lot of incentives to consider. And if that doesn't work, then we can move on from there. But in order to meet deadlines, that's what we're gonna do at the get-go. So we're gonna look at the merger with the financial info with Frank, then look at the worksheet, and then talk about the consultant and all the rest of the agenda items. Does that work for everyone? All right, so let's go ahead and look at the minutes. Is there a motion?
Move the minutes of November 19th.
Is that Ian?
Is there a
Oh,
second?
okay.
Second.
Just, and I think you know this, Amy, just under Vernon, Walter Bro is the
Oh, okay, I was
alternate.
gonna ask, yeah.
Yeah.
He's the alternate?
Yes.
Is he ex officio as well, or?
No.
So say that again?
Walter Bro is
Okay.
the alternate for Vernon.
So he's just an alternate?
And the time is 6 to 7:30.
Yeah.
That's unfortunate, that's what I looked at, unfortunately. Anything else, guys? No? Any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? No abstain? All right, great. So now would be the time for, we have 5 minutes dedicated to hearing from you folks. or any of you who are in the audience, if you'd like to say anything? If not, go ahead.
I apologize for.
Oh, can I interrupt for one second?
Yes.
Does anyone else think they're going to say anything? Because I just need to figure out the time.
Just here to get info.
Okay, go ahead.
So, and I apologize for not being totally up to speed. So can you clarify this committee, how you're bringing your information to each of the towns? Like when you say you're considering the merger, so is this committee going to decide and then ask each town? Or how is the decision being made once it progresses?
So, should I answer that, or is that sort of engaging? But I'll quickly say that, do you want to answer that?
No, go ahead.
So we're talking, and then we're bringing all of this, and every time we have a board meeting in our own towns, like I'm in Putney and Richard is in Putney, we take this information back to our board, and we talk to them. And again, this hasn't been going on very long, right? This just started, and it's going to end soon, perhaps. And then we learn from our other board members how they feel about things, and then we bring that information back. So we're going to ideally, well, our goal is to come up with a potential worksheet and report that all of the towns would have to, all the boards would have to look at and sort of support. I assume we would not vote for that individually if our boards do not vote for that. I suppose we could, but I doubt if we would. And then that goes to the secretary, and then she takes it to the state board.
But I mean, by you saying that you're looking at consolidation, then can it be assumed that each of the towns and the high school district have approved or agreed to look at
No, so
consolidation?
this is a
No.
study committee, we're exploring. And because we have a pretty clear timeline from the state, and it's clear that the accelerated merger is, for many reasons, is the merger the state's encouraging because of the real incentives, the financial incentives. We're looking at that first because that deadline is looming. So we're looking at that, and then if we don't like that, for whatever reason, we're gonna look at the next option, which would be the red districts, or, you know, you go down the list.
Yeah.
And the incentives, obviously, there are none pretty soon.
And if I could just add, in terms of the motion that each individual board made to join the study committee was to analyze the advisability of forming a union school district under Act 46. So the worksheet that, you know, hopefully we start working on, we'll start the analysis of what are the benefits, what are the negatives. I think Frank's information on the financial model is important. So it's really just looking at the advisability of the first step. And at the last meeting, it was decided we should look at the accelerator because that's the time frame that you have to kind of look at that first.
Okay, thank you.
Can we have our guests like introduce themselves and show
Sure.
what town they're at? So that would be helpful for that.
Okay, I'm Eric Findell. I'm just a resident of Guilford.
Lynn Toby, I work here at Guilford School.
Erin Kachuk, I'm on the school board for Guilford.
And I'm Marilyn McQuaid, and I'm from Vernon.
I'm Howard Weiss-Tisman from Vermont Public Radio.
The board member from, what's your first name again?
Erin.
Thanks. Okay. So the next thing is Frank.
Any other comments from the public?
Thanks for being here. Just get out of the way, Frank, or are you doing it with that?
Yep. Okay, so I spent a fair amount of time this afternoon with Ron, and we began the process of understanding the model that was provided by the Act 46 committee and support committee that was formed in conjunction with the Vermont School Boards Association, the Vermont Superintendents Association, and the Vermont School Boards Insurance Trust. So, What we have done is we have taken this model that is provided and developed by this group. The model is intended to help illustrate the impact of Act 46 and the various provisions around options that you will consider as part of the study committee work. You applied and approved a grant to consider the accelerated model first. This particular financial model is designed really only to help you understand the impact of that. So I'll open up a couple of files and we'll get started. Alice, how long did you want to spend on that?
Do you think 15?
Sure, I can do that. And if you give me maybe just 2 or 3 minutes to give you a little bit of an intro to the model, and then we should just do a free form discussion. Ron, did you want to do some?
Yeah, I'm just thinking, I've got one document here that has a disclaimer on it that we should talk about. And then
Yes.
I'm thinking we should hand out this packet to individual study committee members. You're going to kind of walk us through it, and I don't know that you're going to be able to just follow along with this document, but at least you'll have something that I think will be helpful.
Right, yeah, so that document does follow the screens that are provided in this this financial model. This is an Excel file that's been provided. So we should start with a disclaimer. This is important in that there's a concern that because of the complexity of the funding formula and the law, that results or outputs from this model could be easily misinterpreted if it's not understood how the inputs affect the results. So the disclaimer is basically saying that it's intended for this committee. It's intended for discussion. It's not intended to assure a projected tax rate is going to materialize in the future. But given what we know today and the law and the assumptions that we're about to discuss, the benefit of this model is limited to that context. So you have this document. Anything else on that, Ron?
No, I think that's good.
So you didn't write the disclaimer, did you?
That's correct, yes.
Yeah. But we're very good.
Yes. So are you.
Yes. So on the surface, it appears that the inputs are pretty simple, and I do want to move right through this quickly, but I want to give you a little context. In a 30-second glimpse, what we're going to do here is we're going to look at these inputs, we're going to discuss them, and then we're going to look at these outputs. And the outputs are, all of this is in your handout that you have. And the basic format of the output is a school district, a series of fiscal years, fiscal year 16 through 22. That's 7 years. And then it's depending on the inputs, it shows 3 basic scenarios. One scenario is that we do nothing for each, and in each period we affect. Another scenario is that we have a successful vote for an accelerated merger over a 5-year period. And then the third scenario is a conventional merger over a 4-year period. So those are the first 3 data sets that you see, and I'll follow along with you. And I've just got another couple of minutes here, and we'll go through some illustrations. But I do want to spend a little
That's
time.
on page 4 of your document.
That's right. The last little piece here, and then I think you'll find that we can absorb this pretty quickly. The last piece I want to refer to is the illustration of what a single unified system would look like. That's at the bottom of the document on page 4 that Ron was referring to. So we'll take a look at what this means. So to get to a meaningful output, we need to understand the inputs, and that's the primary reason why we didn't send this out by email in advance, because the inputs have a significant effect on the outputs. So the context of these inputs, they're fairly simple. As I said, there's only 3 of them.
This is page 3.
Page 3. What do we anticipate as a system our enrollment change to look like over the next several years? What do we expect our spending to look like over the next several years? And what do we anticipate our equalized grand lists to look at our town offices? There are fixed variables that are encoded in the programming for this. They're listed there. It's the hold harmless provision of Act 60, which we lose that hold harmless provision if we don't move forward over time. That's integrated into this model. The base education amount is set by the legislature. There's an assumption that they make in this model about a change in the future. We don't have the option of changing that. There's a base education tax rate. You're familiar with that. That's where we start every year when we start our budgeting process. They've put that in there on our behalf, and they've provided those 2 cost containment statistics for us. The threshold on which a penalty is triggered for spending per student, and then the percent change. So the AOE or this group has encoded that. And then these statistics, I'm sure you're familiar with. These are the 2 scenarios. If we did an accelerated, these variables are built in to this model as well. A 10-cent discount, an 8-cent discount off the school tax rate. 642 for the 5-year, and conventional is the 8642 for the 4-year. So one last little piece, and then we should open it up. Here's the other information that I wanted you to look at, and it is page 2 of your handout. So I tried to align this data in the same format as these inputs. So you probably already noticed. The data on page 2 is a 4-year historical review of equalized students. We have to make an assumption about what do we project into the future. You see our equalized student statistics at the very top of the page by district over the 4 years. I've added the average change, and you see in total as a system, if we were a unified system, our historical experience has been an average of a 2.5% annual decline. We have quite a variation within district and within year to year. As you can see, Brattleboro Town has actually been fairly stable. Dummerston had a 6% decline in 2015. Who's this guy? Vernon had a no change in fiscal year 15. So you see there is quite a bit of a variation there, but the average is 2.5% decline. When we move over to the model, you see that I started the conversation, but I have no commitment to any of these numbers. These are your numbers. I put in a -2, being somewhat conservative, assuming that maybe we've hit the accelerated decline and hopefully we're flattening out.
And we'll have time to look at, the primary grades throughout the district and match those with the outgoing high school grades to be able to pin that down a little bit. I think 2 is probably safe, but we'll confirm that.
The other data set, the next one on your input screen, is spending. And this is a spending per equalized student. Again, I'm giving you trend information, historical information. What has the trend been in the last 4 years. So you see in total, we're an average increase of 5% over these, 5.1% over these past 4 years. There's also a fair amount of variation in spending, and you know, spending is directly related to the number of students we have. This is a spending per student statistic. So again, quite a range where Brattleboro Town School District has had the most stable enrollment. You see they also have the more level spending average, 2.6%, versus the total average here of 5.1 as a system.
I just want to point out one thing for people that aren't privy to our budget discussions. These are equalized numbers. Our student numbers, our actual number of children alive and in the buildings has continued to go down. It went down to 40 last year. But the equalized goes up because we get so many kids that are from impoverished background.
That's right.
And also the ESL kids count.
That's right. Yep, those are the two
Portion
major
of the
things.
pre-K. Right.
So again, just as a conversation starter, you see I didn't put in 5%, I put in 2% for district spending assumption.
Is that 2.5?
I have 2% in this handout. And then the third option, and then we'll jump right in here to a discussion. The third input variable that affects this model is the equalized grand list. So many of you in your own towns are probably familiar with these statistics. You see a pretty substantial decline in grand lists, and it was an accelerating trend in fiscal year 14, 15, 16. On average, we have had an annual 3.4% decline in our equalized grand list statistics. There is more variability in this statistic than anything else. And I can talk to you, I can help you understand the implications of that in this model. But as you see, I just left it at 0. I didn't make any assumption on that. This varies, significantly from town to town. It's likely that the trend is going to continue down. I'm not an economic forecaster, so I don't have an opinion on how long or why, but we'll talk about
As a safe.
implications for the model. The other two sets of statistic on page 2 are not assumptions that we put in, but they're just reference information that has prompted so much of this legislation, which is tax rates are going up. You see an average of 5% in the recent period. That's what the state is saying. They can foresee that as being unsustainable when you're going at that pace. You're going to quickly outstrip the public's ability to sustain that sort of growth in spending. So let's jump into this model. Before I proceed to kind of describe the output data, do we want to talk about these assumptions, and does anyone want me to change them? Just so you know, the document you have reflects these numbers. But as soon as we push buttons, all of those numbers change.
Will you be performing this type of similar analysis for each individual town?
It is in there, yeah.
I mean, like, will you be able to come to Guilford, to our Guilford School Board meeting and work with just the Guilford members to change some assumptions for our town?
This model is not set up to do that. It's set up to say, if you're going to pursue an accelerated merger or a conventional merger, this will illustrate what the system would become. And it will show the individual Guilford experience if you do nothing versus the accelerated, and that's what we're about to go over. But there is no ability to separate this model other than when we look at the output. You can separate whatever town you want to look at, but you can't say, let's assume Guilford's going to grow at 2% and Brattleboro Town's going to grow at 1% and Putney's going to do something different, and then let's see what happens. And it's also not designed to say, what if just Guilford, Vernon, and Putney joined and nobody else did? Those are, logical questions, but we signed up for, in our study committee grant, to look at this scenario and make a recommendation as to whether it's advisable or not.
Before you go into the specifics, can you say a little bit more about how each of these variables affect the overall formula? In other words, what happens if
Like the grand list.
right, or if equalized students, you're using 2%, down 2%, what if it goes to 3%? What does that, or what if it's a less number than that? What does that do to the overall?
And part of that, I think what you might be getting at is, what if Vernon drops dramatically and Guilford goes up dramatically or something?
I don't think what you said a second ago was that it doesn't read that way. It reads it as a collective. So what I'm just wondering is, what does the collective piece, what does manipulating these things do to the overall?
Yeah, good question. I think I have a general answer for that, but I'm going to make sure I take down questions because I didn't design this, so yeah. I don't have a specific answer. But in general, the assumption of lower student enrollment over time is going to increase the tax rate burden. So as we change equalized students to a higher number in terms of negative growth, we would see a greater impact on the tax rate, and probably a larger savings associated with a union that forms. The change in spending is a similar impact, and we'll probably just illustrate this because it's very easy to punch buttons and then say, what does that do, what does that do? So we can do that. We'll keep it to 15 minutes, and if we want to come back another time, we can do that. The change in equalized grand list is really a number that is, I think, most interesting to a lister, a select board. What it basically does is it says, if you get a $1.50 tax rate and your grand list is $7 million, $1.50 times $7 million, growing at 2% is X, declining at 2% is Y. So it's a measure of actual dollars that either leave the town, go to the education fund, or not, but it's completely separated from the tax rate that the individual person pays.
So then my question is still there. The assumptions that you made of 2 or -2 or whatever, that's a balance for everybody. So if Guilford goes up and Vernon goes down and whatever, it doesn't make any difference, except that it would. I mean, because there's more kids or less kids in any one.
The concept is that if you are a unified system, the data that goes to the state to compute tax rates will always aggregate Vernon, Putney, Brattleboro Town into that one number that you're assuming here. So it matters, but it will come down to a unified system and a single statistic for that system.
Taking that out, that means that should, for example, Vernon lose a bunch of kids and a lot of people move out of Vernon, but Brattleboro stays roughly the same and Dummerston grows, Vernon actually is helped.
That's right. That's right. Yeah, you'll see that in this data. But the I guess the other related point is that if you are a unified K-12 system, those variations in one grade level in one town they're spread over a larger population, so the percent change is likely to be mitigated somewhere else. But the trend is what's important here. Okay, couple of clicks into the outputs with these inputs, and we'll follow through a couple of towns, and I can answer questions, but you'll see it's the same format for each town. So page 4 is Brattleboro. Over on the upper left of this document, you see that, you know, the only selections I had available is I chose a town, so all of these is me choosing a town, and a $300,000 home. We had the 100 and the 200 option as well. So with these assumptions of a negative growth in enrollment, a 2% increase in spending, and no change on grand list, let's just take a couple of column points here and talk about it. Fiscal year 16 is what you already voted on and it's been published, so that's a point of reference that you would see if you looked at your town reports, or if you looked at, you know, our SU annual report, or a variety of places, our website. So $1.64 is what we're, you know, the Brattleboro town, and these are the municipal rates, which means it's pre-K-12. It includes the VHS rate that is proportionally shared, you know, in every town. In 16, we're saying that the taxes on the equalized grand list for that rate were $7,387,000, and a resident who owned a $300,000 house would have paid $4,934 in the year for school property taxes. And that first column, that first series of rows of data is saying what happens if we do nothing. So this stuff here, that's where we're at. The second set of rows are the accelerated merger in the similar data, with a difference between what you would have paid versus what you're projected to pay. So if I could just focus on those two data sets for a minute. You see no change in fiscal year 16 between the first data set and the second data set, and that's of course because we're not rewriting fiscal year 16.
Right.
It is what it is. Fiscal year 17 also stays the same because we're saying we weren't thinking about this 2 years ago like Chittenden East was, and they were moving forward under Act 153. You're coming at this as of July 1st, a law changed, Act 46 opened up a door that was really much more relevant to the Brattleboro system. So we're not doing anything in fiscal year 17. We're voting on those budgets this town meeting. That's why fiscal year 17 is the same. Fiscal year 18 is where we begin to see the implementation of an accelerated merger and what's the impact. So again, on the do-nothing scenario, on that very first line on this document, right here, the $1.83. This increase is $1.64, $1.73, $1.83. That's a substantial increase in tax liability, and that's based on those assumptions we talked about. 2% loss of student enrollment, 2% increase in spending, and no change on the equalized grand list. Why is that going up? Well, because if you're losing students and you're spending more money, your cost per student's going up, and the tax rate is calculated based on cost per student. When we compare that to an accelerated merger with the incentives, you can see you would expect a 10-cent difference, right? Because that's the first incentive that comes through. So Bracktown in this instance would go from $1.84, you know, at $1.839 to $1.728.
Can I just, quick question?
Mm-hmm.
On the fiscal 17, the $1.7399, that does not include the incentive, that's the tax rate.
That's right. No incentive because we didn't vote, we didn't.
Right,
we
so
didn't
and the next year does include the incentive,
Yes,
so otherwise it would be 182.
that's right.
Okay.
Frank, the incentive is the only figure built into this. There's no change, there's no consolidation.
So there's a lot of variables that the state is
It's assuming-
integrated into both the $1.83,
Yeah,
like what's happening with cost containment, what's happening with the statewide property tax and that yield that Act 46 just changed, what's happening with hold harmless students, meaning do you have ghost students, you know, the concept of ghost
Yeah.
students? That's built into this calculation.
But this does not calculate any of the costs,
savings of programming that.
efficiencies that we.
I see.
Or
That's what I was
expenses.
at.
That's a very
Different
important
type of-
point. Yeah, this is worst case scenario where
Right.
for whatever reason we merged but didn't take advantage of some of the opportunities, like a simple one would be we have 7 audits now, we would have 1. Now we spend over $100,000 in audit costs, we probably cut that down substantially. There's a number of those sort of examples that would be very obvious opportunities for
And
savings.
that's where the worksheet comes in, that we
Right.
start looking at that stuff.
And so it's not worth guesstimating at all.
Oh, I think that's
I mean,
part
at
of the
this
work of the
stage.
committee.
Yeah,
but not at this
plugging
moment.
in numbers here,
Yeah.
no.
Yeah.
no.
And that's where we might take the 2% growth in spending and drop it down to 0.
Right.
You know, that's how we would get to that in this model.
Yeah.
Or
So
theoretically,
this is a safe
could we even
approach.
see a
Yeah.
decrease in spending? I
Yes.
think that's what we're hoping with
Yeah.
the consolidations, that
Okay.
it will be less expensive.
So we're almost through the basic mechanics here. So we were saying Brattleboro town resident in 2018, if we did nothing, is going to pay $5,518 with these assumptions we talked about. Under this accelerated model, they would pay $5,186. That's a $332 difference as a benefit. You see, as you go through 2019, 20, 21, that those savings are sustained and they increase because you think about the trend. If we continue to spend more money and we have fewer students and the state keeps this cost per student model, that's what's going to happen. There's no mystery there. So the other point I wanted to review quickly and then maybe click on another town is the SU total is down at the bottom. So what this is illustrating is the concept of a single system. And what's really important to keep in mind is this is just an illustration. What this means is if we sat down as a unified system in 2018 and we came out at the end of the process like we do with all of our separate districts with a tax rate, that tax rate then would not just go to town office and then be sent into all the tax bills. That tax rate would go into Act 46 and all of the adjustments that are unique to each of our towns that get adjusted based on where you came from. So if you are a relatively low tax rate like Brattleboro Town, this tax rate, it turns out, is still lower than you would be if you did nothing, right? This tax rate says the system would run at $1.72 in 2018. The system would run at $1.88 in 2019. Looking at the Brattleboro data, that it says that Brattleboro doing nothing would run at $1.83 and then $1.94. So it's saying everybody wins as the system comes together. But the point is that because we're coming from different places, Dummerston on the higher end of cost per student and tax rate, Bracktown on the lower end, the rate goes back to all the provisions in Act 46 which are built into this model, and it produces this data set that we're looking at. That's the complexity that I didn't want to do on my own, or I was advised not to do, because there is a lot of complexity around when do the ghost students go away, how many are there, what assumption is reasonable around the statewide property tax, what is the base ed spending amount. And then there's a whole lot of other variables in Act 46 that I haven't had time to address. So if I could just click on one town, maybe stay alphabetical unless somebody wants me to
Let's do Dummerston.
click on theirs. Yeah, that would be A, B, C, D. Okay.
I think
So-
for the purposes of this, it might be good just to go through each town.
And I think it's worth taking the time to do that.
Oh,
Yeah.
okay.
We're gonna run a little late
Okay.
with that.
What you see when you have time to review the printed document is that Brattleboro Town gains the least, and the smaller districts like Dummerston gain the most. And that's, again, logical. When you take a system and you bring everybody together, the low spenders are going to substantially mitigate the high spender effect when you take spending students, divide them out, and get a cost per student. So the higher spenders are going to gain the most, the lower spenders are going to gain the least. In terms of simple financial metrics, we're not talking about educational opportunity yet, and of course that's the focus.
Frank, one more question.
Yes.
Just because I know it's taking too long to do the math, I think you've got it, you know the answer. The tax rates for Brattleboro under the 5-year model, are these there's a 5% limit on how much tax rate can increase. Are these the 5%?
That's
Or are these
another,
under the 5% so we don't have to worry about the limit of that?
if we go to the accelerated 5-year, that is a provision of Act 46 that says, yes, it's built into this assumption. Meaning, you can lower your tax rate by more than 5% if you're Dummerston, because you're higher than these numbers. And you don't have that option in the 4-year. So, and then on the other side, Brattleboro's situation is no tax rate will rise more than 5% in the accelerated. That's capped.
Well, until those years are over.
Until those years are
Yeah.
over.
But are any of these what they are because they're above the 5%, so this is the number?
I'm not sure, I haven't had a chance to do that, but it's a good question. I'm curious
Yeah.
to know that as well.
Because the tax rate it's still costing us more, it's just only being allowed to go up to 5%.
Yeah, you know, just doing the easy math, and you probably will spot it, is so if you have a base number of $1.73, right, in 2017, and we know 10% would be 17 cents, so half of that is, 8.5 cents. So the question is $1.83 more than 8.5%, and it is, I'm in 17 at $1.74, going to $1.84, that's 10 cents. So the answer is, yeah, it looks like the 2018 5% you will not rise more is engaged.
Yeah. So it's actually, we're spending more than that, but that's all we're.
That's right. So that illustrates the benefit to Brattleboro, even though it's nothing like what we see here in Dummerston. As you look at Dummerston on page, I'll come back to page 5, but it says in page 5 for every town, it's if we restated fiscal year 16, meaning if they did a retroactive law that says, we're going to take away your small schools grant, we're going to take away your GO students, and we rewrote your 2016 budget and tax rate, that's what you see there. And so we can talk about that, but it's another one of those doing nothing scenarios is an expensive option. Okay, Dummerston, page 6. Same kind of data. When we look at 2018, as we did with Bracktown, you see we have a difference of $850 between the two years, meaning doing nothing versus an accelerated merger. That's as opposed to Brattleboro Town's $332, right? So it's substantially more beneficial, financially. And when we go out to the later years, if these statistics and trends continued, it's a substantial benefit, and this is what the architects of Act 46 anticipated.
Does the model project out after the incentives expire?
No, that's the year that's
No,
missing.
that's the question.
But 2022, it's not hard to imagine what it would look like, because in 2022, all you have is a 2-cent incentive. And the act does say you will retain your small schools grant and your hold harmless on variation beyond the,
So the only thing that would change is the 2% incentive is gone, because it's already
The 2 cents.
factored, or 2 cents,
Yeah.
because it's already factored in everything else. So you
The
can
hold
do.
harmless does gradually disappear.
does it out, it sunsets eventually? Okay.
So would you take the do nothing model and subtract the 2%?
Yes.
And then that would give you roughly what,
Well, the do nothing, there is no effect, so,
right?
It just keeps
so
going.
you would take 2022 and you subtract the 2
Right.
cents from that, yeah.
And that's where you would be with the accelerated merger after the incentives drop off.
If you did no program changes, yes. Yeah, and it's hard to imagine, when you look at the mergers that have gone forward and the benefits that have been achieved, that you know, we wouldn't see some of the similar benefits. With Chittenden East, I remember seeing it on a video that maybe we saw at a finance committee or one of our,
We saw it here,
you know, and
too.
he referred to a $300,000 savings, and their budget is less than ours. Their budget is,
It's important that they project a $400,000 savings in the first year, but they realized about $40,000. And that was by combining a job, and, you know, none of that's been realized. That's what they're projecting.
Yep.
So it's important to keep that in mind.
Because they're in their first year, or why is it?
They just started, and they're not getting these because they did it before the law.
well,
But that's why they
But that's
haven't
the-
realized.
Because they didn't get the
haven't-
incentives?
No, but they haven't
No,
realized,
they're
because they haven't
thinking-
gotten through the year.
No, this is what they think is gonna happen, but nothing's been realized.
Go ahead.
I mean, they haven't made any other real changes that will lead to those real benefits.
Do you want to
Is the penalty for doing nothing also incorporated in this?
Yeah.
I believe that is, yes, the 5%.
5%?
Yeah.
Okay.
Well, there's an alternative to doing nothing, which is
I
to
know.
do this kind of study and say we want to stay where we are.
Right, but
And then apply to the
I
small
wasn't sure
school.
if that base one had the 5%.
This is important, but we are getting tight on time, but I appreciate that. Did you want to say something?
So that's what I was gonna ask, is the
Yeah.
5% incorporated this, so I'll make that my question, is 5% incorporated in these numbers and the
My
penalty?
understanding it is, yes, and I'll confirm that.
Okay. So just, Frank, it's 7:17.
Okay.
Just heads up.
Real quickly then, okay, so you see the Dummerston scenario, and actually, I probably don't need to go through this thing. The main reason for this was if you wanted me to throw in 1% or 4% or whatever, you know, you'd see the impact. But as we just do the quick flip of the pages, Guilford's benefit is a significant benefit has already been achieved because of the way the middle school has been incorporated into the dams. So financially, that's been a substantial benefit to the Guilford tax rate.
You mean in 2016?
Yes, so their tax rate has already come in lower than our other schools, similar to Bracktown, because of that, that arrangement that we have. Now that is a 5-year agreement, so it needs to come to a standard.
Right.
And if we do nothing, there will be a substantial increase to this. So we didn't make any of those.
This is assuming that we continue with that.
That's right. Putney is similar to Dummerston in a significant financial benefit over time, and Vernon sort of in the middle of all of the schools. Okay.
Thank you, Frank. Hold on. Anyone who hasn't asked Frank a question?
Yeah. Why do the numbers for tax savings continue to increase as the incentive decreases?
Primarily because the cost of doing nothing is escalating, cost per student, and we're losing the hold harmless benefit around the change in student
So
growth.
due to the penalties associated with it?
It's the cost containment and the provisions that said, we're gonna protect a small school, those things go away. And it's really those two indicators. They go away, and even though we go from 10 cent, 8 cent, 6 cent, 4 cent, the loss of that revenue and the loss of the ability to have a higher student count when your actual count is lower, that's the ghost student issue. When those are unplugged, those consequences are greater costs than the loss of the benefit.
Anyone? Yeah, Don.
So I just want to make sure I understand this. So if you look at page 4, if we do accelerated for FY '23, what would the rate be? It'd be that one up, it'd be the do nothing rate less this rate.
Yeah, that's something that I'd like to spend more time with the folks that made the model, because that scenario doesn't it doesn't seem to be what you would expect. So it says that like we're page 4, Brattleboro at $2.10 for after the incentive goes from this system, which is at the bottom. I'm assuming you're saying we're at $2.37 as a system. Okay.
Oh, yeah.
Okay. So this scenario, I didn't fully understand, and I want to understand this better. But what this is saying is, okay, your system has now absorbed all of the various districts at their various historical spending. You've created a unified system, and you're operating at $2.37. But Brattleboro is going to be looking at a $2.10 bill that it's got an incentive to it. Maybe it's because you're retaining the hold harmless. I'll have to look at when that does sunset. I was assuming it.
The high school has a hold harmless. The elementary schools don't have any.
Yeah. So those variables are going into that calculation, and the other years it kind of makes sense. But that year, I thought Brattleboro is the only one where there's an anomaly in what I would have expected to see. I did ask a person I got a hold of this afternoon, but they didn't have any technical background.
And then my other thing was just a clarification on page 5, looking at that for just Brattleboro, for instance. Say again what those numbers represent.
Right, so you'd also want to be looking at page 4 and sort of flip back and forth. So just put in your memory $1.64 on page 4.
Yeah.
And then you look at $1.65 on page 5, and what it is saying is that when you lose the hold harmless phantom students or small schools grant, you're gonna get the consequence of that if we restate it. And I know Brattleboro Town does have those students. I know you've been.
The elementary?
Yeah.
I didn't know that.
The state doesn't indicate that.
Yeah.
We've never seen that.
As I recall, I've seen a statistic on that.
Well, the state table that lists the schools and who hasn't doesn't include, it includes high school, but not the state.
Yes, it's always said we don't have any ghost students.
I recall there being them, but I'll look into that.
Thank you.
But that's what it means. So a school like probably Dummerston is going to see a bigger difference because you used to have a small school grant. It's varied. So that's why if we restate it, and some school districts have a greater, ghost student backlog than others.
Thanks.
Yeah.
So, anyone, Kim or Matt or Ricky, any questions? Matt? No, you haven't spoken.
I have one question. It dawned on me that what we're looking at is only the school tax rate, and does not include the municipal tax rate.
Mm-hmm.
Is there anything in this Act 46 that is have an impact on the municipal tax rate to raise it in any way, shape, or form? Okay.
Actually, two questions. One, I'm not sure why I mean, I have still some more questions, I'm not sure why we're done now
Yeah.
with this. I'm not sure there's anything that's more important. And so I guess my question is,
It's you that says, let's not just look at the money, that's why we're
Well,
doing it.
I think we're gonna come
I
back
asked,
to this
I asked if
too.
we could have this before, so we
So
could,
we can-
yeah, so we could talk about it, and frankly, I think I could have looked at it through an email and been able to understand it better. So
Why don't
I'm
you quickly
concerned
ask
about the
questions?
withholding of the information, but that's not my question. When will we be visiting this again?
Every
Because
meeting.
I think
Okay.
all the
because- yeah,
time.
okay. Because some of
Yeah.
this seems like magical thinking,
I
So,
need
yeah.
to spend more time with Frank and Brad James, quite frankly, from the AOE, and just plug in some other assumptions and
Yeah.
and just understand some of these things.
And
The
if you add
questions that
up
were
how
raised
much
tonight.
the tax savings in any of those years, where's it gonna come from? You know, those-
Yeah,
where's the money gonna come
I'm talking about our districts. I mean, I
So how
want to
we
get
can
some of
leave
those answers that were asked by this group related to our individual districts.
You mean on a state level?
from?
Where's the money gonna come from? You mean the state level, if we're all getting?
If
these
we're all
tax
getting
cuts?
lower taxes, where's the,
That was
Where's
part
the
of my
money going to
question,
schools gonna come
coming out of
from?
municipal. May I ask one more question? Is there any type of coordination between the Department of Education, whoever came up with Act 46, and the Office of Economic Opportunity to find out whether or not they're projecting any economic growth, stagnation, or decline in the years covered by Act 46? Because that could impact the taxes as well. If the grand list goes down because of crappy economics or business decline in our area, and that's possible, nothing is really achieved.
I mean, I would think those are questions for our legislators.
Yeah.
I mean, they went through a pretty
They're the fools
lengthy
that came up with
process.
this thing.
Well, I'm not making any judgments. They spent a lot of time working on this, and people like David Sharp, who has spoken to the Vermont School Board Association, the Superintendent's Association, they pretty well can explain some of the implications that that was part of this legislation, so. And, you know, towns are asking those questions.
okay.
And I want to clarify that I'm the one who said let's not share this, based on conversations with Donna and Brad, and what was obviously complicated those assumptions do make huge differences. So there's a lot to learn, and really no one's keeping information. So I want to let you know that. If you blame anyone, you should blame me.
I blame the Superintendent's Association and the Agency of Education for trying to shepherd this and control what gets presented and what doesn't.
We're getting a little off track.
And the VSB.
We are. But I've heard that concern before from other people, so I think it's worth addressing. So we have about half an hour left, right? So I want to remind us that we only have a couple of meetings currently scheduled. We're scheduled through mid-January or something. And if we want to really, if we want to actually attempt the accelerated merger, we need to get on the paperwork and the report very soon, so it's even an option, so that this is a worthwhile process, and then move on. But at least to attempt the accelerated merger, we need to get some paperwork in motion. And the worksheet is what we have to do. I'm not sure, do we create the worksheet and then do a report, or is the worksheet the report?
I think the
Is that-
worksheet,
That's my understanding.
the
right?
worksheet then becomes the report, but it has to be refined, I would think.
So, since we have half an hour, we could start chipping away at the worksheet or figure out how we're gonna do that. Now, it's my thought is that as we chip away at the worksheet, we're creating our charge. We're determining what's important. And so we can look at the questions that have been created, or that Dave and others have come up, have sort of consolidated with Amy as part of that process. I don't know if we want to create subcommittees. I'm just trying to organize the conversation because time is tight.
Well, my question
Yeah.
was, because time is tight, shouldn't the first thing we talk about be whether we even want to pursue the accelerated merger?
But we've already voted to pursue it.
No, we voted to look into it.
Well,
Yeah,
The committee will look into it.
Yeah,
So I think,
go ahead.
Ian, what she's saying is slightly semantically different, that
Mhm.
when she's saying to pursue, what she's
I
really
see,
meaning
yes.
is that we're going to go, that's what we voted on the last meeting, that we're going to give it due diligence and due process of thought.
Yes.
And that's going through that worksheet. So we have to go through the worksheet in a certain amount of time, and if we don't get through it in a certain amount of time, we have automatically excluded ourselves from potentially obtaining that 10 cents and going into that accelerated. So that's what we discussed last time, that we want to go through the process and the worksheet and come up with the answer. We don't have to ever file for it, but we have to do that in a timely enough fashion that that option still remains for us.
And that process will allow us to determine our ultimate option if we don't decide to go through it.
What's our drop dead date on that?
Well, good point. So they now, the agency, the State Board of Education now has 2 meetings in December, in January. Is it December or January? December. They've added another meeting, so we have a little bit more leeway.
Yeah, the last meeting in January is January 19th.
In an
And
ideal,
that's assuming that we're looking at town meeting votes.
exactly.
So we could go a little beyond that, but that's with that town meeting date involved.
So does that mean that's when we have to have everything to them? Is that what you're saying?
Probably earlier.
So, yeah, I mean, ideally, if we were actually going to do, if we determined that we were doing this, we would have all the paperwork to Donna tomorrow, which is not gonna happen, right?
Well, it says brief, specific statements, so.
Right.
How
So
brief can
so
you
we
get?
could, so we could hand it off to someone to do
Well, you
for
saw
us.
that 47-page brief.
Yeah,
Oh, that brief.
they overachieve.
They have nothing else to do.
So, what do you
I
think?
think realistically, beginning of January. If we're able to put a report together and send it up to them, I think we're in shape for the 19th.
By the beginning of January, we should be done with the whole worksheet and walk
Yeah.
through all those questions.
Yeah.
That's what you're saying?
But we can come up with drafts along the way
Yeah.
and shoot them up to anyone we want actually, and get feedback. And again, ultimately, we might not do this, but this is a learning process.
Or we could decide before January 19th that we don't want to submit a report.
Correct, right, at any point. And we can submit a report and change our minds. But we could also talk about this process for the next 15 minutes. So I suggest that we would start with the first question on the worksheet. Or we could talk about a consultant immediately who would help us with this process.
Well, with respect to the worksheet, I think it would be most efficient if we broke into working groups
Mhm.
and that everybody addressed, and then you'd establish a timeline for each
This is the.
little working group to bring their information to the group, and it would be tweaked by the group, and then hopefully put into its near final form.
And did we get a clarification that we could be tweaking on Google Docs? Because coming here and tweaking all together is going to take hours.
Yeah, so I've not been able to get a firm confirmation on that, no matter how hard I've tried. So my suggestion is that small groups could work on Google Docs and then, share it with the larger group. But it's, 2 or 3, I don't know what a quorum is in our setting, could do that. Would everyone agree with me? Does that make sense?
Yeah.
Because we could manage our time much better that way. So
If somebody has the ability to set the documents up so that we can.
oh yeah, so you're suggesting is that we right now determine who's working in the subgroups, and we do that out of this setting? Or are you thinking about doing it right?
I'm thinking of doing it outside this setting, and then you bring your information back and present. And then the group discusses, makes adjustments, and then we get to your final form for that particular item, and then move on to the next item.
So I'll give you an example in terms of, I think, the administrative support that we can provide for goal number 1 and 3, and I'll read those. Goal 1, the proposed union school district will provide substantial equity in the quality and variety of educational opportunities. We have the program description, and I've been making some adjustments to this based on things like the consistency of programming, considerations like consistent academic programs, academic coaches, teacher leaders, multi-tiered system support, Title I services, after-school extended programs, summer programming, Head Start, pre-K. And then, so that's just one area. And then goal number 3, the proposed union school district will maximize operational efficiencies through increased flexibility to manage, share, and transfer resources with the goal of increasing district-level ratios of student to full-time equivalent staff. So as part of our special ed consolidation, we're continuing that, and so we will have a lot of information that we can bring for this current budget development, but would have an impact on future staffing. So I think those are areas that Lyle, Frank, and I can clearly help a small group put together. Some of the others, I don't know.
Does anyone have a suggestion?
So Ron, you're saying not just central office, but you'd want a small group?
Yeah,
Yes.
yeah,
Yes.
yeah.
And those are key ones where you can be helpful.
Yeah.
So how many people do you want in a small group? 2?
Well, how many are there?
How many, yeah. And this could be
Maybe
voting.
look at the goals and see,
Yeah.
you know, I look at some of these goals and I say, I don't know who's gonna do that. So maybe some of you would say, oh, I can do that. But like number 2, proposed union school district will lead students to achieve or exceed state education quality standards. I think we're kind of doing that now, and we will exceed that. So I think when we do number 1 and 3, we can just refer to that. So I don't think you have to do any work on that. Proposed union school district will promote transparency and accountability. You know, we can look at other districts' templates and see the language they used. Proposed union school district will deliver education at a cost that parents, voters, and taxpayers value. I don't know, we can ask the community about that, I guess. You know, I think that's kind of a consideration of cost savings. So I'm not sure what we do with that one. Regional effect, you know, geographic, I don't think this applies to us. What would the regional effects of proposed union school district, including would be proposed union district, leave one or more other districts geographically isolated? I just put a no on that.
It's really the person who doesn't understand what they're already doing.
Number 3, the grades to be operated by proposed union districts. I think that's pretty easy to plug in. 4, the general cost and general location of any proposed new schools. I don't think that applies to us. 5, a plan for the first year of proposed union school, transportation of students, assignment of staff, curriculum. Again, I think we're gonna do that as part of the first 1 and 3. As far as collective bargaining, I have some information from Vermont NEA that I can share with the group that I think is important.
So are these ones that you're saying would not apply, I mean, do we just put a big old NA and you don't do anything?
That's what I'm saying.
Right.
Well, do we all agree it shouldn't?
Well, I'm just going through them.
Yeah, like curriculum, we've already done it. We've already met the.
Well, I think you can also put in just a 2-sentence thing,
Yeah, yeah.
that we've done this over these years, and this is, so you're not gonna like ignore it,
Yeah.
but it wouldn't require a lot of write-up.
Right. That's kind of what I'm trying to go through in my mind, what's gonna take some time and what's not.
So, does anyone have a suggestion of, do we want to ask Ron and Frank to quickly give it a go, and then the small groups would take what they've done and adapt it to the group's will?
Do we need multiple small groups? It sounds like just 2 or 3 people sitting down with Ron could write this up in an hour or 2.
I believe that can
I don't
happen.
know about that, but.
This is more like 20 hours right there, at least.
I mean, I guess what I want to do is look at the framework from other districts, put our stuff into it, and review it either with a small group or a whole group.
So when you say I wanna do, are you really meaning I? Or are you meaning consultant hiring, or?
I'm thinking initially just Lyle, myself, and Frank going through things that we know, and kind of sharing it with either a subgroup or the whole group. As far as a consultant, I think like the legal stuff we're gonna need for the articles of whatever they are. And then I think like the proportionality of the board, if that's what we're going with, that's where you guys can think, okay, so what do we want? Do we want a 15-member board? Do we want a 9-member board, 10-member board? What would the, it's kind of how we set up this committee.
So maybe that's one subgroup.
I would think, yeah.
Well, it sounds to me if central office is able to put together kind of an initial go at it, then my preference would be to go over that initial draft with the entire group rather than a small group, since I think we've got so many varying opinions that if we just have a small group,
Yeah.
I would be concerned that we wouldn't get a.
And Ron, how, to have the three of you, not to dump this on you, but to have the three of you take the initial go at this.
Yeah.
What kind of time frame do you think you would need to do the initial go?
Yeah, I mean,
So that we can do our planning as far as when we can look at your initial go and then add or subtract or whatever.
I know Frank has a lot of pressure with budgets coming up.
Yes, he does.
But I would think that between Lyle, Frank, and I, we'll be able to get an initial language or answers for the next meeting, which is, where is that?
2 weeks.
17.
Yeah, so by
The 2 weeks?
Yeah.
Okay. So so in theory, we could, on the 17th, look at the initial go, and then the rest of us could all chime in at that point.
Yeah, right. And what I'd like to do is try to get it out before the meeting.
I would think ideally several days, 2 or 3 at least.
Couple.
Does that work for people?
Yeah.
Yeah. So are there was
This is
someone,
something to start with.
yeah, someone suggested that there were areas that would benefit from a small group, which was
Maybe the board
the makeup.
configuration, some small subgroup of this group might have opinions.
I would imagine that everyone has an opinion. My concern is that could end up being a very long conversation at this board level.
That's what I think a subgroup.
Could be.
Shouldn't that be a long conversation?
Yeah.
Yeah, it will be, but we're trying to stay focused, so,
But if the smaller group goes through the long conversation, perhaps the rest of us can go through a faster conversation.
But being a small group, you're not gonna be guaranteed that you're gonna get everyone's
All the
opinion there. I think that's too
Well,
big a
therein
topic
lies our
to
thing.
go
We
to a
have
small
to
group.
speak to whatever small group representative and let that person hear our opinions, and that's.
yeah.
I think a subgroup like that, if you have some of the smaller district representatives in that subgroup, they're gonna be speaking from, let's say, a Vernon or a Guilford perspective. Or
Perhaps it's one person, well, right,
Yeah, no, one from each, one from Bradford.
could be one from each.
Well,
But does that that creates a quorum? No?
I thought this group didn't really have.
I don't know.
no, I think if you're
It's
talking about
We're
4
not making
members.
policy.
Yeah, you're not taking action.
Yeah.
Yeah, unless you don't take action, you should be okay.
All right.
So
That's
do
at
we need
least
an
one
actual
committee.
motion to form that subgroup? You want that?
We
I'll
could,
make one if you want.
might as
So
well.
that would be for item number 10 on the list, the term of officers or directors, those who are elected.
Yeah.
Oh, no, number 9.
2.
Number 9 and 10.
9 and 10.
So my motion would be that we form a subgroup to look at numbers 9 and 10, and that the subgroup have one representative from each of the towns. And
Oh,
that-
look
and
at,
somebody else could decide whether we should have one from BUHS and one from Brattleboro, or is it okay? I don't really have an opinion on that. One from Brattleboro, so.
I think it would be important to have the high school on that.
All right, so one,
Just because of their
one
bigger
from each of the
board.
representative groups here, then. Each
And
town.
isn't for the
BUHS.
smaller towns, I mean, there's only one of us anyway.
Yeah, so that's.
Yeah.
Well, but you may, some of you have alternate, or you could send somebody else from your board, I would imagine, if you didn't.
Okay. Yeah.
Yeah, that would actually be probably a good idea, engage more people.
Do you need
Because
to-
otherwise, all the town people are gonna be on all these subcommittees.
Right.
How's that gonna work?
So that's a motion.
Yeah, do you wanna
Marlboro's
restate it?
Marlboro's
Or-
asking the town to add 2 people to give them a 5-member board, because there's so much work involved, this is 3 of them can't.
So
Okay.
restating my motion
Yes,
would be
please.
that we form a subgroup to look at numbers 9 and 10 on this outline, and it would be one person from Brattleboro, one from the BUHS board, one from Vernon, one from Putney, one from Guilford, one from Dummerston. Did I forget anybody?
Is there a second?
Second.
Any discussion? I would only say, Erin, that there are so many conversations to be had, and we have to start somewhere.
Yeah.
Yeah.
And
Um,
I just want to say quickly too, you guys are really working hard and I appreciate that. This is
That's
good.
very nice of you.
Yeah.
All those in, any further discussion? All those in favor? Aye. Any opposed? Okay.
Do we actually have names?
Yes, I guess we do. Well,
Why don't we set a date, and then you guys can all go back to your board and see if somebody else wants to do it?
there you go.
Let's set a date, so that person has to go with that date.
Does anybody want to be the coordinate, putting that all together?
Jill, do you want to put that together?
I don't want to be on that. I really do.
Okay, I'll put it together. Are there any other questions that we need to go through that process with? Any recommendations from you guys?
I'm sorry, what was the question?
Whether there are any of these goals or questions that we need to form small committees to look at. Right. Go ahead.
Ron, what is the function of this sheet, this worksheet in relation to the final report?
I think it provides a template to guide us for the final report. When I look at, Chittenden was pretty lengthy, but when I look at Westford's, Essex Westford, I can kind of see where they, they have an executive summary, and they have the governance decision in terms of a 10-member board. They have the financial efficiencies and incentives.
Yeah.
There's a section in here about equity in terms of educational opportunities. So I think it provides a framework for this report.
But it doesn't translate into the report itself. It has to be.
Yeah, I mean, what I would hope is what we come up with for number 1 and 3, if you feel it's appropriate, then we put it in a narrative form for the report.
I have a question looking through this. Number 8, the allocation of capital and operating expenses of the proposed union school district among the proposed member. Must be good. So, isn't that what we've been talking about all along, that it just goes back by student number? Isn't that a no-brainer question?
I think it is generally, yeah. Where there might be a consideration if there was an asset that was highly likely to be disposed of, sold, then it's a different issue. But from what I understand, no town is looking to close a school, and there's no reason to make an exception in that area as long as that's the case. Those things can be contemplated in the future. It's not like things are going to stay the same forever. But if there's no vision for closing a school or selling an asset, a major building, capital asset, then there's a very simple provision in state law that basically says if you form a union, all the assets become transferred to the new entity upon the creation of the vote of the electorate.
So you would be able to answer that question easily with that
I think so.
statement? Yeah.
And the same with indebtedness?
Yes.
So we should issue some bonds, quick.
Issue some what?
Some bonds.
Well, doesn't this also deal with the fact that if an individual district has been allocating capital funds or putting capital funds towards a particular project, that remains towards that
Yes.
particular
Oh, do we
project?
have some of that?
That's clearly
we
what
got
we
energy
would
projects.
Yeah.
be supporting.
Yeah.
And I think at some point we'll need the legal consultant to show us what other districts have done in those areas. I mean, capital planning is one of those areas that, again, I think it'll benefit all the schools, because to look at certain models that the schools have accomplished and other schools probably haven't devoted as much resources to that, to make sure that they do.
There is legal language from the state about property.
I was wondering, Alex, two
Yeah.
things. I wonder if an hour and a half next meeting is really gonna be sufficient, even though everybody wants to be out of here as quick as we can, just with the timelines we're talking about, trying to get this stuff done.
So
for
you're
January.
proposing a 5 o'clock start with dinner at your place? I mean,
Actually, Vernon
That's what
served
it
a
takes.
great dinner last week. Let's go to Vernon.
And two, with the property thing, with that, and I don't wanna get sidetracked here, but would that mean potentially that the SU could own a building instead of renting a building, or no?
So I think your district's gonna have to, I would recommend your district's gonna have to look at that. Brennan's gonna have to look at that. What that means, for example, we have almost a 200-acre forest.
Right.
And so our town is
Frank, you should
looking at that.
Right
You know, these are.
Well, what else do you
clearly
guys,
issues.
I like this, I didn't know about it.
No, we don't necessarily. I just wondered, like, now we rent the SU office. I just didn't know if it would enable a building to be owned potentially down the road. That can't be now because it's a different entity going forward.
Yeah.
I don't know. Maybe that's not
Yeah.
a valid question.
No, it's
just
a
I'm
good
wondering.
question.
So this is,
I think
this
the
is,
answer is yes.
yeah, this is the sort of question I would assume that all of our boards are having, you know, the fears and the concerns that we have not yet had a chance to address. You know, what do I not, what's the worst possible scenario of Act 46 for our towns? You know, there are so many benefits, but we have not talked about the fears and how, as we construct, as we write this worksheet, we should be thinking about those things so that we are writing a document that works for us, right? That's just not creating a cookie cutter model.
So maybe when we're at our board meeting, we could all have specific lists of things that we want to bring back to our full boards, which I guess maybe that's one of the questions. What is, like, what property do we have? A 200-acre forest is very nice. Like, we got a solar array, right?
Yeah.
But, you know,
Actually, we have an option to buy that.
What, the solar array?
Yeah.
20 years.
The
We have
solar
a pellet boiler, we're willing to.
I got a bridge for you. We just bought one.
We'll trade you. So guys, there are 9 more minutes. So we're all gonna take these issues back to our boards, right?
But if we had like a set of questions that then we'd ask the questions and we wouldn't all have to think of them again.
Okay.
Who
Go
should
ahead.
we send the financial questions to Frank?
Gee, you think?
I just wanted to be sure.
It seems to, if all questions went to Alice so that there was
Yeah.
a central
Yeah.
conduit and then we'll be sure
Yeah.
that we're all looking at the same thing.
Sounds good.
And then other questions, like I sent you some questions, Alice, or do you
Sent
ready
me-
for
I
today?
just haven't had time to answer them.
Are we collecting questions still in general?
Yep, and we're gonna send them all to Amy.
And then when are we gonna
Yeah.
look at them?
Maybe the next meeting?
Right, so in the next 5 to 10 minutes, we want to quickly talk about the consultant and the website and community engagement and our next meetings. I would agree with you, Matt, that our next meetings have to be a little longer, if not at least an hour. I would say at least 2 hours.
Yes.
You tried the hour and a half.
So,
So the next meeting
yeah.
is scheduled for Putney. You have a meeting at 5 or 5:15. We were gonna start this at 6. If we go from 6 to 8,
Yep.
does that work?
I'm sorry, start at 6, go to 8.
6 to 8.
Yeah.
Putney
Okay.
still?
Yep. And why don't we talk then about future meetings? Does that work?
If we could set some now, that would be good.
Okay, let's look at them.
You've got one January 7th. That's in Dummerston. And then you have one, maybe that's the last one.
We have them on 21st.
No, we have on the 21st.
21st.
But our deadline was?
Our deadline is
I think by the January 7th, you know, you need something if you're shooting for town meeting.
So realistically, if we're only meeting the 17th, and we want to have everything done the 7th, the week after the 17th is Christmas, the week after that is New
I'll
Year.
meet you on the 24th in Vernon.
for dinner.
Ian will let you in.
Why not the 25th? Nothing's working that day.
Do we want to try to get a meeting in there or not?
Yeah.
I think we ought to consider abandoning the town meeting option.
We could do
Think
that.
about special meetings. And we could try it, but it doesn't. I
It
don't
just
see
costs the
point.
taxpayers more.
$2,000
That ticks me off.
No, don't, you mean for the,
To run another additional meeting costs us every
It's
time.
about $400.
So if we meet the week after Christmas, that Monday or Tuesday?
I think we should aim for that
Yeah.
and see what's realistic.
The 11th through the 14th.
Did you have vacation plans, Ron?
This is more important, Jim.
We're canceling their vacation.
They can Skype us.
So what,
No, we're talking about December.
what are you guys thinking?
Like the 28th or the 29th. 28th is Vernon.
You guys meet?
Well, there was a debate on whether that
Oh.
one's gonna happen.
The 29th is open.
They're dedicated.
Can we do the 29th?
Open.
Yes?
So Vernon, you don't think is gonna meet?
I had that week.
I think Dana was gonna be gone, I'm gonna be gone on
Yeah.
the 28th, I come back the 29th, so I can
Okay.
make that.
So we're
29th,
29th, where?
Academy would hope.
Yeah, might
Okay.
be better about it, Academy.
So the 29th at 6 to 8 at Academy?
Yeah.
This is great. Okay. Amy, do you want to quickly talk about, we do have only 5 minutes. Do you want to talk about the website, or is there nothing to
There's
address?
nothing to report there. In terms of community engagement, I've taken the Addison Rutland's frequently asked questions and then working through it and expanding it and making it into the WSESU Act 46 Study Committee, frequently asked questions. So it really, my goal hopefully is to have something that will not only give us, act as a reference for us, but also can be an educational tool for people who are just learning about this, or, people who've been following and have questions, so.
Do you want someone to look at that, or would that be helpful?
I'm gonna email it to you
Okay.
by Sunday. That's my goal.
Okay.
And then it can be tweaked however we want. And then I sort of envisioned it as we go along in the process, as new things come up, we would add to it and keep it as sort of a working document potentially, so.
Okay, good. Anything else, guys?
The community engagement piece, did we
Yeah.
all say what we were gonna talk about at our next board meeting, so we're gonna try to coordinate that thing?
You mean the dates in January?
Yeah. Well, but if it's not till January, we pretty much, if we're
It's
aiming
true.
for January 7th. Well, I guess that's still okay though, right? We could communicate, we could engage with something real. And by that time, we could say, well, we've looked at this part and we're gonna go for it, or we aren't, and this is what we've considered. What's that?
I'll give you an example of Dummerston. Their next meeting, they're gonna have Frank do financial review, along with other questions, I think.
And you talked about that too, Beth, maybe having Frank come. Because Frank really likes this at budget time, to come around.
It's a good use of.
He's gotta be there for the first draft anyway, so why not, sorry, add to it.
Yeah,
We can do that.
okay.
What the drop dead date for warning, if it is gonna be on the town meeting, what date that is, it has to be warned?
Probably to get it to the Agency of Education and State Board by early January.
And the towns would then warn it by, what's the date, the last date for the
It's usually
town?
like the third week in January.
The town meeting is March 1st this year, for most of the
Yeah,
towns.
so it's usually the
So
30th of
30
January.
days before that.
So as we have 3 minutes, any last minute thoughts? What have we not covered in our crazy?
Agenda items for the next meeting, official.
Yeah,
Finances.
So we're gonna look at the finances again, we're going to go over the worksheet, the draft.
which we're gonna get ahead of time.
Yep.
And the reports from the subcommittee on numbers 9 and 10.
And number 9 and 10 report, okay.
So
And
the 1 and 3 subcommittees won't meet between one and them?
Well, I think we want them to.
We didn't say we were gonna do a subcommittee, we said they were gonna try to do a
Yeah.
first draft,
Yes.
and then we
Right,
all
We
looked.
only created one subcommittee.
And the subcommittee we will organize at our next
Okay.
meeting, because that's when we will know who our members will be.
For
That
that,
I heard.
Well, you're gonna try to give a date then, that would be good.
I think I'm gonna organize that, right?
Yeah.
And I'm
Send a
gonna
date.
contact all of you, and we'll do it via email.
Okay.
And just make sure you respond to me directly, not to the group.
And did you, I know Jill asked, but we didn't pick a date for the group to meet. Do you want to do that now so that?
Do you wanna take the time to do that now?
Yes.
Okay.
Your discretion, your date.
I'd like to do it via email, because I don't have my
Okay.
calendar.
All
I
right.
mean, I have a few, is that okay?
Okay.
Do we want to extend the next, we talked about the next meeting going potentially longer?
Yes,
Yes.
2 hours.
2
We
hours,
talked
6 to
8.
Yeah.
Do we have to do something with the consultant tonight, though? Because if we're gonna be doing this accelerated, we need to expedite that,
So
so
we
we're not
did-
gonna have time.
We did talk about, Ron is, I believe, suggesting that we don't actually hire a consultant yet, that we get a lawyer involved.
I think the grant that we'll have approved soon, based on Donna's Russo Savage's and Brad James'
Yeah.
discussion that we had, we would use the consultant for legal consultant, and also, I wouldn't say facilitation, but somebody that's gonna help with the report. And so-
Cleaning it up.
Yeah, and so, the person that we've been told would be in our area is a woman named Diana Watson. And she's worked with other districts, so I think she's capable of working with us on, you know,
But we've not
any
talked
approach
to
that we take.
I'm just thinking it's a really busy time of year and she may be contracted by other.
Yeah, I don't know the dates of availability, so, I mean, I think we just have to play it by ear and see. If she may not be able to come to the meetings, all the meetings, but, you know, she can certainly help with the work behind the scenes. I don't think we need somebody to facilitate meetings.
Are you all comfortable with Ron going ahead and doing that? Yes?
Yes.
Kim? You okay with that? All right. Yeah? All right, anything else? It's 8 o'clock.
Motion to adjourn.
Second?
Matt, what's that?
Is there a second? All those in favor? Aye.